Welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name's Philip. I'm a landscape photographer based in the Midwest, and on this channel we talk about landscapes, nature, and traveling, and how those go together. And in this video, I'm going to give you my 5 best tips to improve your landscape photography composition. Okay, so tip number 1 that we're going to start with is find your subject. Now, this may seem obvious to some of you, but maybe some of you it's not as obvious. So when you arrive on a scene, you have to ask yourself, what is it about this scene that to you like the most? Is it that really big awesome mountain? Is it a really cool tree? Is it a waterfall? Or is it a person enjoying a nature scene? You kind of have to ask yourself this question every time you go out and shoot, because that's going to help you compose an image that tells a compelling story, right? You want to go ahead and clearly define your subject, because that's going to tell the viewer what the image is about, and it's going to help the viewer make more sense of that image. So tip number 1, go ahead and find your subject. Tip number 2, you need to compose for your environment. So what does that mean? So when you travel, or when you just do photography in general, the conditions are not always going to be perfect. So for example, sometimes you're going to get to a place and there aren't going to be any clouds. So in that example, maybe that means you don't include as much sky in the picture, right? So that means your composition is going to include a little bit more foreground. And the opposite of that, if it's an amazing sky, then you want to build your composition around showcasing how awesome that sky is. So tip number 2, you want to compose for your environment. Tip number 3, you want to create depth. Now, what is depth? Depth is the job, in my opinion, of the photographer to translate a two-dimensional image, such as a picture, or a print, or you just having someone look at a picture on their phone and translate a two-dimensional object and make it appear to have three-dimensionality, right? And this is something that is a perceptual thing, and that you put into a photograph, right? So obviously it's not three-dimensional because it's on a flat surface, but you can use certain elements in your photo to make the viewer feel as if they were there when you took the photo. So what are some ways that we can add 3-dimension or depth into our images? First, you can start by having a good foreground. Secondly, you can use leading lines. And third, you can have scale. Now, for this example of this picture I'm going to show you, I believe and that this image contains all 3 of these elements. So this was an image that I took in Colorado, and I saw this amazing view overlooking this town. So instead of just taking a picture of the mountain and the town, which would not have included any depth, if you look in the bottom left hand corner, which I have circled, you'll see that there's a small triangle which includes some kind of land, and that really grounds this image home, right? It gives you as the viewer an idea, a place of, maybe you're standing up on a grassy hill, for example. I mean, I shot this off the side of the road, but for this image, this is what I included. Now for leading lines, if you notice down in the bottom right hand corner of the image, there's a nice little river or creek or whatever you want to call it that leads your eye from the bottom right all the way into the image to where the town is. And in the right hand corner of the image, there's a slope that slopes down, and that also leads your eye down to the town, which leads me to my third point of scale, right? Everyone knows, for the most part, of how big a house is. So what that does is it leads all of these elements, these leading lines, lead your eye to the town, which gives inside of your brain a reference of this is how high up you are as the viewer, or I was as the photographer taking the image. And then also with that mountain in the background, it gives you a scale of how big that mountain is in relationship to how big and or small, however you want to say it, that those houses were. So in my opinion, this image works really well on explaining how depth is so important to creating more of an atmosphere and just letting your viewer feel like that they were actually there when they're viewing the image. So tip number 3, create depth. Okay, tip number 4 we're going to talk about is edge patrol. Now, what is edge patrol? When you are composing an image, you just want to make sure that the edges of your frame are free of any distractions, or you want to minimize these distractions as much as possible. In this image that I'm showing you now, I did and did not do a good job of edge patrol. So unfortunately, if you look on the right edge of the frame, there is a yellow tree that sticks out. Now, I knew this when I shot it. However, there was no getting around having that tree in the image. So unfortunately, what my original intention was for this image was to use this fence line as a leading line to lead you up to this huge aspen grove. And it does a good job of that. However, the reason edge patrol is so important is that in this image, the light catching that yellow tree distracts your eye and pulls it off to the right, in my opinion, and distracts from the huge aspen grove in the background, which is really what I wanted the viewer to see. Now, this is easily fixed in Lightroom with the clone stamping tool. And I'll show you an example. I'll show you the final image once I clone stamped the tree out, and I feel that this image does a good job again of providing depth. But you know, just with edge patrol, sometimes it's not always going to be easy to get rid of those things. So when you're composing the image out in the field, you just want to make sure that your edges are clean and free of any distraction, because there's some things that, you know, you're going to get home and realize that you can't, you know, clone stamp it out in Lightroom, or, you know, do some more fancier things in Photoshop. So, and along with edge patrol too, you want to make sure that your subject or the elements in your photograph have breathing room, right? So you don't want to be almost cutting off your subject's, you know, a tree branch, for example. You know, you don't want to be squeezing too far into your subject to, you know, it just makes the image seem a little bit crowded, in my opinion. So adjusting for breathing room, I think, is also very important. So tip number 4, watch your edges. Okay, and my 5th and final tip is going to be to use the light. Okay, and so what does that mean, use the light? The light, in my opinion, dictates what you shoot and how you shoot it, right? So a turd, right, is not a very appealing thing, right? But a turd in the right light can look pretty good, right? You know, obviously it's still a turd, but the light can help make that subject that maybe isn't so interesting, is really why I'm using that reference. You know, good light can make a very non-interesting subject a lot more interesting. So for this example, I was out kind of in my local area shooting sunrise after a hoarfrost, and if you've ever shot a hoarfrost, you know that if you backlight hoarfrost, it has a really beautiful glow to it, and I've shot them several times in my life, and this is just kind of something that I was looking for. So having known that the light was going to do this, it kind of dictates how I was trying to compose images that morning. You know, I wanted to make sure that the sun was between me and the subject, so I could highlight that hoarfrost and kind of just give it a warm glow and kind of a cold, wintry type of atmosphere. So that's tip number 5. Okay, these are my 5 tips that I think would be very, very beneficial to help you improve your photography. With that being said, if you like this video, leave a like. I would really appreciate it. Go ahead and comment down below some tips that maybe I left out, or some tips that you like to use to help get yourself some better compositions with your photography. And if you want to see more tutorials or travel vlogs in the future, go ahead and subscribe, because there is a lot more of that coming up on the channel. And with that, thanks for watching. Bye.